The United States, with assistance from the USS Harry S. Truman, has been pulverizing the Houthis from the Red Sea. Now the U.S. seems ready to drop a 30,000-pound bunker buster on either Iran or the Houthis. If this happens, it will cause unrivaled damage, essentially rendering the Yemeni capital of Sana'a into a Gaza war zone. But why is President Trump about to take these drastic measures? And how is this forcing Iran to abandon the Houthis? The United States and Yemen have been at it for a few years. With the Houthis being a proxy to the larger Islamic Republic of Iran, it has been carrying out strikes for Tehran since the beginning of the Israeli conflict. Located along the Red Sea, Yemen is the ideal location for piracy. However, the Houthis are not looking to steal or kidnap, but rather to disrupt trade and destroy the ships of their enemies, regardless of whether it is civilian or military vessels. With millions of dollars of damage done, the United States eventually chose to intervene, moving the USS Harry S. Truman, or USS Carrier Strike Force, from the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. The move was designed as a show-off force, with the hopes that these Houthi strikes will cease, but it hasn't. In fact, the Houthis have doubled up on strikes, aiming for cargo vessels. And in March of 2025, U.S. President Donald Trump had enough. Dubbed Operation Rough Rider, the United States began launching bombing raids and campaigns on Yemeni targets. At first, the aim was to target radar systems, air defenses, and ballistic and drone launch sites. These were all military assets sent to Yemen by Iran. However, they are now being used as a way of directly targeting commercial vessels. The United States obliterated these defenses and military assets. By March 2025, it was reported that the Houthis had attacked at least 190 different vessels. They managed to sink 2, seized 1, and killed 4 seafarers in the process. This not only enraged Washington, but everyone affected around the world had to go through this frustration. On March 15, 2025, the United States was finally fed up with this situation, and estimates suggest that at least 40 attacks have already taken place on day 1. Their targets are mostly Sana'a and the Sada Governorate, which are the most likely locations of Houthi fighters. Over the subsequent days, the United States continued belting the Houthis with more and more missiles, eventually wiping out a few leaders, according to the White House. Nevertheless, the Houthis persisted, launching strike after strike, even going as far as targeting United States military assets in the Red Sea. Fortunately, they missed, but this certainly infuriated the president. A few days later, the media began reporting of 7 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers located on the military base at Diego Garcia. This move was absolutely shocking, as it comprises about a third of the U.S. B-2 bomber fleet. Iran was clearly shocked, and on April 3rd, the British Telegraph reported that Iran had abandoned the Houthis, essentially rendering their influx of weapons and finances useless. But why? Why is the United States so intimidated by the B-2 bomber? In the U.S. arsenal, there are many different variations of the bunker buster. The GBU-28 and GBU-37 are 2 of the most well-known variations of the bunker buster. It ranges in weight, with the biggest being about 5,000 pounds in total weight, and the ability to penetrate more than 20 feet deep before deploying its load. This has become a problem for these terrorist organizations who rely heavily on underground tunnels and bunkers for their activities. Since Israel took action against Hezbollah and Hamas, the world first became aware of these bombs. They were used to take out big leaders of these organizations and proved that no bunker would keep them safe. These massive bombs are often mounted on the B-2, which gives the United States a stealthy way of delivering a lot of damage. This is exactly what the Houthis found out on October 27, 2024, when President Joe Biden ordered strikes on Yemen. But recently, the United States developed the GBU-57A/B bomb, Massive Ordnance Penetrator, a 30,000-pound monster of a bomb that could theoretically penetrate deeper than its predecessors. while causing a lot more damage. While never used in actual combat, this massive bomb has a length of 20 feet, while being 0.8 inches in diameter. On paper, this bomb packs one hell of a punch, and it is filled with about 5,000 pounds of TNT that can easily eviscerate not only a bunker, but almost anything that has ever gotten in its way. In fact, the GBU-57A/B might just be the scariest bomb the United States has ever developed, and this is all thanks to Boeing. What's even more scary is the fact that the B-2 can carry 2 of these 14-ton monsters. And since they are both GPS-guided, they can be individually sent to different targets. If you think about it, 7 B-2 bombers, each carrying 2 of these bombs, means that 14 of these 30,000-pound bombs can be dropped one after the other. That's almost 200 tons of bombs currently lying in wait for Iran or the Houthis. It has not only created a lot of distress in the Middle East, but Iran has been scampering to come up with a solution for this problem. It's no secret that the Houthis don't have the military assets or technology to put up any kind of defense against such an onslaught. While using air defenses, it is mostly the seasoned S-300 systems, and this cannot even stop a standard F/A-18 Super Hornet. Not that the Super Hornet is a bad jet, it is everything but bad. However, it doesn't really compare to something as capable as the B-2 stealth bomber. Essentially, the Houthis will be completely destroyed if Trump gives the go-ahead, and this will lead to tens of thousands of civilian casualties, while destroying the bit of infrastructure left in the Houthi capital of Sana'a. Meanwhile, Iran might take their chances with these bombs, but in reality, they don't have anything that could stop it. Despite using the modern S-400 system, it has already proven ineffective against the US F-35s. Back in October 2024, the Israeli Defense Forces launched Operation Days of Repentance, in which more than 100 Israeli aircraft, including the US-made F-35 Lightning chassis, launched repeated strikes on Iranian defense infrastructure. Despite Tehran claiming minimal damage, satellite images revealed that Israel had almost completely wiped out Iranian anti-air defense systems and set the country on the back foot. Tehran vowed to attack, but we are yet to see such a retaliation, mainly due to fear of further escalation and complete air dominance. Keep in mind that this was done by advanced Israeli pilots, commanding some of the most advanced aerial weaponry the world had ever seen. But this still isn't the very best of what the United States can offer. It is important to note that when a nation sells an aircraft to an ally, it rarely sells the latest and best equipment. Many of these aircraft are designated for export, meaning they might not fully hold all the secrets that the United States could have at its disposal. On the other hand, the United States has yet to make a strike on Iran, and with its newer and more advanced weaponry, it could mean that Iran is absolutely devastated, without even seeing what hit them. This is particularly true if the US chooses to deploy some of its F-35 models. While the USS Carl Vinson and Harry S. Truman carries an elite version of the United States Navy aerial contingency, it doesn't have any F-35s on board. It could carry some of these if the US chooses, but no formal clarification about the real makeup of these aircraft carrier jets have been released. Unfortunately, the trusted Super Hornet, or F-18, is a fourth-gen fighter, which makes it very susceptible to strikes from the Russian S-400 anti-air batteries. Moreover, the F-16 runs into the same problem, which is also why Ukraine has been using them so sparingly in the air against Russia. However, if the US does ship some of its F-35s to the coast of the Red Sea, it could spell absolute disaster for the Houthis and even Iran. These jets might not have a massive range, but thankfully, the British Army is also stationed on Diego Garcia as a way of helping the US. Thanks to the British support, the United States have managed to launch all these attacks. The British use what is known as the Voyager, an Airbus A330-200, converted in a military capacity, which is used for air-to-air refueling, This means that having a squadron of F-35s could become dangerous for the Houthis, but even more so for Iran. It has led to the Telegraph stating that Iran has finally abandoned their longtime proxy. But why? Since the attacks have been ramped up, the Houthis are slowly losing more and more of its leadership and military infrastructure. This might have been a warning sign to Iran, who now feels that it might be next on the list. What we haven't mentioned yet is the fact that the U.S. has deployed its 124th Fighter Wing to the Middle East, which consists of several A-10 Thunderbolt II aircraft, further giving the U.S. even more firepower to launch attacks on various Iranian targets. Subsequently, Russia has sent a general to the capital Sana'a. In what the Telegraph reports, this unnamed general is responsible for giving the Houthis further advice on launching counterattacks on the U.S. carrier strike force groups. So far, it has all failed, and given the fact that Iran sends much of its weapons to Yemen, it might have some alarm bells going off in Tehran. Despite the closer proximity of the Houthis to where the United States has positioned itself, it barely seems to get close. Meanwhile, they are taking shot after shot with these bombing campaigns. Now, the move doesn't necessarily signal a weakness in Iran. Much rather, Iran is realizing that perhaps the Houthis will be wiped out, and with many high-ranking Iranian officials stationed in the country, it could put them in a very precarious situation. Should an Iranian official be struck down in Yemen, it will almost certainly force Iran to respond. If they choose to just let it slide, it shows weakness, which follows the previous weaknesses exposed by the IDF back in 2024. Perhaps Iran knows that it cannot retaliate to the sheer force currently shown by the United States, and it would be much better to bring these officials home and avoid a catastrophic situation. The other option is that Iran might be preparing defenses, perhaps expecting a U.S. strike and needing all hands on deck at home to prevent something like this from happening. Whatever the reason is, it seems clear that Iran doesn't want a direct engagement with the United States, but still needs to maintain a strong posture so as not to lose any support or respect locally. But many might raise the question of whether Iran cannot simply respond with a random barrage of missiles or drones as a warning shot. Even if it doesn't hit U.S. military infrastructure, it shows that Iran is willing to fight. Well, a complete miss will make Tehran look foolish, but the real problem is if one of these missiles accidentally hits their target and a U.S. military target is down. This will almost certainly create a very woeful situation for Tehran, who will now be facing the strong might of the U.S. military. The bigger question is rather, can Iran withstand a U.S. war? If an American target is hit, it will create a lot of pressure for the United States to launch a full-scale invasion. With Iran already weakened thanks to Israel, it will be a straight-up fight, and no one is coming to its rescue. Since no confirmed nuclear weapons have been noted in Iran, it removes the risk of this spilling over into nuclear warfare. Moreover, Iran will need to rely on support from a weakened Russian Federation. In fact, Russia is currently dependent on Iran for supplementing its own nuclear effort in Ukraine. Looking further, we can see that Global Firepower, or GPF, who ranks 145 different militaries based on about 60 different factors, the United States should easily wipe out Iran. In terms of ranking, Iran is only 16th, while the United States have been firmly holding number 1 for decades. In pure numbers, the U.S. has about 1.328 million soldiers, with just under 50% of these being actively serving troops. On the other hand, Iran has a standing army of merely 350,000. 13,000 U.S. aircraft will surely establish air dominance compared to the seasoned 500 that Iran can put in the sky, and the 11 aircraft carriers Washington can put on the front line will completely destroy anything Iran puts in the waters. We could go even further with 3,000 more tanks to the U.S., hundreds of thousands of armored vehicles, and not to mention the nuclear capabilities of Washington. This is one hell of a force, and Iran knows they have absolutely no chance of even coming close to this force. Perhaps moving its troops and generals from Yemen is merely a contingency plan to prevent the United States from directly attacking Iran. Moreover, President Trump has not been lying about the success of these Houthi strikes. The death of Hezam al-Assad, Wazam al-Assad, Onogais, a senior member of the Houthi Supreme Political Council in a March 25th strike on Yemen, has raised serious questions about how much longer the Houthis can possibly withstand these strikes. One official who spoke to The Telegraph had the following to say: "The view here is that the Houthis will not be able to survive and are living their final months or even days, so there is no point in keeping them on our list." This could suggest that the Houthis are willing to die when it comes to finishing this war. But unfortunately, Iran is not willing to die with them, despite this all being for the same cause. So, how is a situation like this going to play out? First of all, it is crucial to understand that the Houthis are done. There is absolutely no way for them to resist this U.S. onslaught, and it might even become worse. However, should they desist from attacking these cargo vessels, it might encourage President Donald Trump to spare Yemen from any further destruction. Unfortunately, it will not bring a halt to the tension with Iran. Aside from Iranian support for Hamas, the United States claims that Tehran is on the brink of developing a nuclear weapon. President Trump wants Tehran to come to the negotiation table, where they can reaffirm a way of stopping this from happening. In fact, no one aside from Russia wants a country in the Middle East to have nuclear capabilities. Should Tehran continue refusing this deal, President Trump will likely continue ramping up pressure and using the Houthis as an excuse. Having permitted the terrorist organization to do this in the first place has already given the United States enough reason to continue pressurizing Iran. As of this video, it doesn't seem likely that Iran can avoid either going into a war or signing President Donald Trump's deal and rendering years of in-depth research useless. Meanwhile, Iran needs to deal with further pressure from both Europe and the UK. Unlike the current situation in Ukraine, the West is firmly on the same side and believes that Tehran needs to be stopped. But the world is in a very tense place, and the Red Sea is becoming a hot zone. Do you think Iran has a way out without losing its dignity? Let us know in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe to our channel before you check out this video on how the Houthis tried to take out a U.S. aircraft carrier.